Well, after what feels like an eternity of rust busting underneath the E30, it's finally time to give it the protection it needs in the form of a generous coating of Dinitrol 447 Underseal. Now, from the outside, this BMW still looks like a nail, but it's soon about to look absolutely gleaming underneath. If you've been following along with the build so far, you'll know I've put in considerable effort, and it'd be a shame not to lock that in with a good quality underseal job, especially as I'm planning to keep the car for a long term. I actually used this same Dinitrol 447 stuff on the rear end when I had the fuel tank and the rear subframe off, and it came out really well, but I do remember having an absolute nightmare because it kept blocking up this shuts gun as I was working, which turned into just pure combat. But the results were really good in the end, so I was quite happy with it. So I'm not really looking forward to applying this, but I think it's going to be well worth the effort. Let's hope I learned from my previous mistakes. The underside of the car is currently completely rust-free and in etch primer, especially where I went down to better metal, of course. But before I can go ahead and crank up the compressor and get ready to spray on the Dinitrol, there's a few areas that need a bit of extra attention, a bit of extra seam sealer and a bit of epoxy primer as well, just to make sure it really is nice and sealed. So the first thing to do is crack the seam sealer out and get on with that, and then we'll go from there. Right, so my seam sealer's now had a few days to really set up nicely. I used a combination of products, starting off with this brushable Ranal seam sealant. I actually applied this in quite an unorthodox way, using a card, almost like how you'd apply filler. I got big wedges of this on the card and I pressed it into all the seams and then smoothed it off. I was quite pleased with how that went on because I struggled using a brush when I was doing the rear end, hence me trying this new technique, but I think that's how I'm going to do it going forward. It worked well. I followed that up with this MIPA PU400 grey seam sealer, which is applied with a corking gun. It's quite a bit thinner than the Ranal stuff, so I used it around the more intricate areas to get it into all the gaps that I want to make sure are fully sealed when so the car doesn't rust from the inside in the future. The trick with this one is to actually apply it nice and thick around the intricate areas, then give it 5 minutes or so to firm up, and then come in with your finger, preferably with a rubber glove on, smooth it into all the gaps just to make sure you've filled it all, and then walk away and let it set up solid. After letting the seam sealer set up hard for a couple of days, I came in with the epoxy primer. This is a nice durable primer which I've used in the past. I gave a spritz over everything I'd seam sealed, but I gave special attention to areas that I'm going to mask off from the underseal that I'm going to be spraying on. For example, studs and mounting faces like this one for the front subframe. So I've got that on now, and that's had also a couple of days to set up. So I'm pretty happy with where we're at with the underside of this car. I think there's not many reasons not to get on with the spraying now. So the next thing to do is to get under there with the masking tape, mask off all the studs and mounting faces. Then we can crank the compressor up, and I'll talk to you about the Dinitrol 447, which I'm going to be using to underseal the whole car. All my studs and my mounting face is masked up, and I've even come up with a strange way of masking off that fuel tank and the rear end, just so I make sure I don't spoil my nice paint job on those. I think it's time to crank up the big compressor and get the old hazmat suit on and be on with it. So this Dinitrol 447 stuff is the same stuff I used on the rear, and I was really happy with how it came out in the end. It's got zinc within it, so it's quite rust inhibiting, and it leaves kind of like a hard shelled but elastic coating in grey. I've gone for light grey, same as the rear. I've gone for 4 litres to do the floor pan and the front end of the car, which I think should just be about enough. I used 3 litres on the rear, but I wished I had a little bit more at the time, so I think 4 should be enough for this part. Now, the way you apply it is actually with a shuts gun like this, and I had some trouble last time with it blocking up. So you really need to move pretty quickly with this stuff and avoid trying to get the dregs out of each tin, because it just gums the gun up really quick. You want the compressor about 3 to 4 bar to get optimal results, and it does come out very fast, so you need to keep the gun fairly far away from what you're spraying to avoid it building up and turning into a run. If you want more details and more tips about how to actually apply this stuff, check out the previous video, which I'll link in the description, where I go into more detail, which is the time I was doing the rear. Then my tips were a bit more fresh, so it might be worth checking that out if you're planning to do the same job. But without further ado, let's crack on and spray the car. Right, so it's been another few days since I applied that, and I've just about recovered, despite the fact I pulled half my beard out from a few drips of Dinitrol that went into it. That's actually a top tip. Definitely make sure you've got beard protection on whenever you're dealing with Underseal. I actually had a hard time with the gun blocking up again, but at least I knew what to do this time. The trick with it is to get it straight in thinners, take this pipe off and poke it through with something long, like a long screwdriver, which is what I used. And then once you've given it a good flush through, back together, next can on, and then after a couple of seconds it starts coming through correctly again, but it is a pain in the arse. Unfortunately, I did get a couple of nasty runs, which I'm blaming on doing battle with this gun, so I was under duress at the time. But the truth of the matter is, once the car's back together, nobody's going to see it, so I'm not too bothered. Quite happy with how it's gone on after all. However, I think next time, if there is a next time, I'll definitely be purchasing another shuts gun. So I think one of the keys to getting a better result would be to just hot swap the guns instead of having to clear one gun out and having to pause and get all frustrated. Despite the challenges, I'm actually really happy with the finish I've got with the Dinitrol stuff. Now, like on the rear end, I'm going to take the opportunity to add in this cavity wax, which will go into all the nooks and crannies and give it that bit of extra protection. It's Dinitrol NL, which I'll tell you a bit more about in a minute. It's actually a bit more fun to apply than the Underseal and a bit less messy, so let's suit up and then get straight on with it. Right, so now the compressor's charged up to 10 bar, we're about ready to start spraying. But first, a quick note about this Dinitrol NL stuff. It's quite strange stuff. It kind of looks like vinegar. It's a dark brown. It's got about the thickness of water. It's very odd. It's got a slightly minty smell to it as well, which luckily it doesn't smell like vinegar. This is actually an open one that I used for the rear and I've been storing. I only ended up using about half the can for the rear, so this should be enough for the front too. So I guess 1 litre could probably do a whole car's worth of cavities if you're in the market to buy some yourself. My only gripe with it is it's brown, so it spoils the look of my uniform grey Underseal that I've just put on. But it's doing a very important job, so I'll tolerate it. To apply it, you use the same shuts gun again, but this time with a tube on it that's got a handy brass fitting on the end with holes all the way around it to ensure that you get like 360 degrees of spray out of the end in any cavity that you feed it into. You'll see how it works in just a second. I guess I'll get the line hooked up to it, get it screwed on, and I'll get under the car and start applying it. I've got the compressor set to about 3 bar through this, which should be plenty. The same as I'd used for the Underseal. Well, that's gone better than expected and a bit less messy than last time, probably because I was a bit more conservative with my application this time. I've wiped off some of the excess where it's starting to run out of the holes that I sprayed it in, just to make sure it doesn't stain the underside too much. And it's starting to drip down on the floor a little bit, which it'll continue to do for a couple of days before it congeals up and then stays put. With that job done, I'm very confident in the underside of this car now. Now, I'm not planning to be using this car through winter on salted roads or anything like that. It's going to be a weekend fair weather summer toy really. So I suspect I'm never going to deal with rust on the underside of this again. It should be a permanent fix. It's another milestone on this project really, and I actually can't wait to no longer be crawling around underneath it and doing some more enjoyable jobs on the top side of the car. One of the next things I'm thinking about doing is exploring whether I can do a removable front core support, which might come in really handy with having an engine swapped car. I need to do a little bit more research and work out if it's actually going to be worth the effort. If it turns out it is, that'll probably be the next video, so make sure you subscribe to see that. If you've enjoyed this video, please make sure you give us a like, and thank you very much for watching.